don't go away. Take your seat, please. Come on. Let me invite the panel, that is Professor Cao, Vice President Yuan, and Judd, please. We have about, strictly speaking, nearly 5 minutes left. But let's see if we could stretch it a little bit. So the first order of business after you take your seats would be, if I may invite the panelists to offer maybe some brief comments of each other's presentations. Shall I begin with Professor King or John?
Well, I would have one question to Professor Cao. I certainly admire the interest in general education for the students at Tsinghua, many of whom are scientists and engineers. I would like to ask about the question of whether the bachelor's degree is enough. That is, do you try to do this in a 4-year education, or do you believe that the education cycle for such people is going to have to be graduate level as well?
The bachelor's degree in what subject, you mean?
Well, let's take engineering.
Just take engineering.
Or chemistry.
I think maybe Professor Yuan is in the position to answer this question, because it's about undergraduate students' education and engineering.
Yeah. I'll rephrase it again. Are you working with a feeling that it should all be done within the 4-year bachelor's degree, or whether it takes longer?
Well, that's a very good question, and we have been thinking about that for some time. And so far, we have not yet get very clear a clear idea about that. Ideally, I think that either liberal education or general education should be how to say that, how should be distributed, should be interacted with specialty education, major education into, rather than to put it individually. And so if you put it individually, yes, you will raise that question whether we should put more hours, put more time for the student to learn. So far in Tsinghua University, undergraduate it's 4 years. Yeah. So we try to integrate it so much factors into it, rather than to do it by increase the
and we think the idea of liberal education, or the method of liberal education, should be carried on throughout for the undergraduate studies, as well as for for graduate studies, including PhD students. And we are moving towards that direction. But we have to start with the undergraduate education. Right.
Let me add that the current state that we have individual, the so-called liberal-oriented,
cultural quality-oriented
organization. Okay, individual and independent. That's not the ideal status. That's just we just want to start by doing that. Eventually, we would like to eliminate that. We would like to integrate the liberal education, general education into our whole curriculum.
Very desirable.
Yeah.
Maybe Tsinghua is well positioned to do that.
We do have such a tradition.
Other comments for each other?
Well, I guess one kind of broad macro comment is that this issue about general education is a universal one. There is some form of a debate going on almost every corner of the world on this, and there's really kind of no final answer. It's like I think most institutions will always be struggling with this issue in some form. In the U.S., for example, we've kind of had an experience of about every 8 years or so, we have this debate between breadth and depth.
Yes,
right.
yes, right.
So even though, so there's no perhaps magic point. And another reason why I think that we all recognize is that the world is changing all the time. And that has to be reflected in a curriculum that is changing all the time in some form. So it's a struggle, I think, for all institutions in various ways. And then just to say the shortest thing about the international effort at Tsinghua, which I think is very admirable, I think what we see, at least some of the work that my colleague Dick Edelstein and I are looking at these kinds of issues about how institutions internationalize, is that often it's a very bottom-up or piecemeal thing, and that institutions really need to think more integrated form, not just the curriculum, but how it relates to other components. And that's not an easy thing as well, but it sounds like Tsinghua is beginning to really think about this in a very productive way.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, please.
I think it has become a general knowledge, or widely recognized that general education should, for research university, should be based on general education. So for this point, no problem. But I am a little bit wondering about the effectiveness of general education in the college. So general education contains a lot of things. So for mathematics, for philosophy, for physics, for financial management, no problem. For this part of education, no problem. But the most important part and the most difficult part is for culture, for history, for philosophy, for their part. Usually this part, it takes a long time to train the student, perhaps from his childhood, boyhood. Okay, the younger student, the younger the boy, the more easier for training such potentials. But at graduate level, undergraduate level, maybe too late. Okay, so for example, if you read Tang poetry, as you mentioned, 300 Tang poetries as you are a boy, you may have a lot of feelings. Okay, that may influence your life. But if you read it in college time, okay, without any, so you may have no feeling. So I think effectiveness of general education is a big issue. Okay, so you need to attract students into the classroom. So this will propose a high requirement for the teachers, the quality of teachers. Okay, so I don't know. So my question is going to Professor Judson King. So how do you have any statistics in your experience? Okay, so on the distinction of a different. So if with intensive general education or without general education, and how can you get good, excellent teachers for improving the effectiveness of general education? Okay, that's my question.
The question is a good one, and I believe getting good teachers, at least in our system, is a matter of providing incentives for people to do it. And there are examples of that at Berkeley and elsewhere. There's an incentive attached with this freshman seminar program, which provides at least distribution, if not general education. One of the recommendations from this general education report that was done through our center is that there should be mechanisms for faculty to get together from different disciplines and build general education courses or sequences of courses that relate to particular current important issues. I suppose one could take global warming as one example from today, but there would be many others. I think it might be helpful if I said something and then cited a statistic that to me has been very impressive. I do believe that general education needs to be both cultural and science and even engineering. And a reason for this is the general public must have some appreciation for the methodology of science and engineering in this day in order to know what that is being said to them makes sense and is based upon good methodology and what does not. So I think general education needs to cut across the spectrum that way. Now the statistic. I understand that at Princeton University there is a general education course organized by their college or school of engineering working with other departments at Princeton, and that the result of this is that something like 85 to 90% of Princeton undergraduates are taking a course in engineering. That's amazing. And I think we need to work much more in that direction, too. I believe that the general education effort, rather than being some of this discipline, some of that discipline, some of the other discipline, probably needs to be much more integrative these days and bring the disciplines together and have situations where engineers and social scientists and humanists are teaching in the same course. We have some of these at Berkeley. One effort that I happen to know of is one on major risk events. And that has social scientists, business school people, and engineering, and I believe public health teaching together. Those are some thoughts.
Please.
Okay. Here I have a question about the general education again, and my question is for John. Actually, my student just complained a lot that he's absolutely got lost with the general education because of a large area of the selective courses provided by the university. And as for a student, you may cover the history, humanities, whatever. And they do not know how to focus. And this is on one side. On the other side, with your graduation, you have to. For example, now with the research-oriented university, so research is focused on one specific point, right? So can you just tell me and share with your inspiration or insights on how to balance the large diversity of the courses provided by the schools for the general education and the specific orientation for the research? And because the students, so this is the balance point. And secondly, I think maybe if the students just get lost and cannot putting back to the specific point, and I think this kind of depression might becoming a psychological stumbling block for the students, and it comes to be contagious. Right, so I'm not exaggerating the effect. This is just a fact that I have got from my teaching experience. Thank you very much.
I'll ask very short. Okay. I'll say a little brief, but then I would defer to my colleagues, and that is, this is an ongoing debate, this breadth versus depth. Believe you me, after you get the best GE program, you're still going to have that debate, and you should have a study every 8 years to try to look at the issue. But what I would say is, it would help us, I think, if we always think about disaggregating, that there are different student experiences. So the student who's in the humanities versus engineering has a different outlook. How they experience that program, you need to disaggregate to understand that. And I will argue again, you need ways to get feedback from students. Not that that should drive all your policy making, but it can tell you whether things are working or not, or that you really need to think of different student groups in different ways. After that, I would defer. Because I know Judd has looked a lot at this issue about GE, much more than I have.
So if I may ask Judd and Professor Yuan each to take 20 seconds for last words.
I guess my one addition would be that I do believe that we can't just rely upon distribution requirements and the courses that happen to be there for general education. We do have to give very thoughtful design to general education. And my desire, I do believe really that the world is too much split up into disciplines. There's all this intellectual power associated with individual disciplines. But the world, the academic world, is split up too much that way. And I think the big motive of the present day is to find ways to come across disciplines, blend disciplines, bring complementary disciplinary outlooks to bear. That would be my comment.
Thank you.
Well, we in Tsinghua University we haven't reached that stage, so we don't have that kind of complaint from teachers. On the other hand, we have the composite. Most of our teachers are very good at very special education, majoring education, so it's not very good. So far we haven't provided so diverse curriculum courses, so we haven't got. Still, I think, well, the purpose of a general education, if it's just for generalization, I don't think that's the essence. The essence, eventually, it should be help to specialize in some field. So here, yes, there's ongoing topic to discuss. So between speciality and the generalization, we do need a balance. So right now we are still thinking about that. So I personally, I think eventually the general or liberal education should be integrated into the whole curriculum rather than to emphasize in this area, or in this time, or in this level. Well, that's my idea. Okay, I would like to take this opportunity to say another. I'm very much interested in Professor Douglas' work. Before we came here, we heard of some of that about the survey you have done, and we would like to. You mentioned, yes, we also have the intention to cooperate together to do that kind of work. Yeah, I personally very agree with you that the equation, one side is teaching input, another side is student outcome. Yes, we do need to pay more attention on student outcome, student performance, rather than only look at the teaching input. So I just want to say that we have the intention to do collaborative with you.
Terrific. That's a most welcome announcement. So I am
May
sorry
I
that
add one point?
We are beyond our allotted time and in fact encroaching into the closing ceremonies. So the ceremony, and Melissa Dale has been very unhappy with me, as I could sense it palpably coming across from the other end of the room. So I am very sorry, but thank you very much, and a round of applause. You're all